Good morning, everybody. So, welcome to yet another episode of Environmental Social
Hi,
Justice. We have a very special guest today, Kitty Adams. She is the founder of a
Kitty.
company called Adopt a Charger. And of course, Joy Langford, our environmental consultant, is visiting us. We are missing Joel today. He fell sick, so he was unable to join us. But Kitty, this is your show. This is all about you today. Adopt a Charger is an amazing program that you started,
Thank
basically
you.
helping people in disadvantaged communities gain access to chargers. So I'm just going to let you take it over. This is all about you right now.
Okay. Well, let me just give you a little bit of background on Adopt a Charger for those that don't know. I started Adopt a Charger back in 2011 as a nonprofit. I started it with a couple friends from Plug in America, which is the EV advocacy group.
Yep.
And I worked prior to with Plug in America. And the reason why we started Adopt a Charger as a nonprofit is back in 2009 when the American Recovery and Reinvestment money was being distributed. A company, EcoBuddy, got $200 million, Charger got $50 million. What's happening is they were crowding the EV charging stations in commercial zones in metropolitan areas. And hey, it is great that there's an EV charger at the Walgreens by my house, but I'm never going to use it because I charge at home. And at that particular charger, they have a 30-minute limit and it costs $1.50. So you're going to add at that time like 5 miles of range for $1.50. I just saw it. I wanted to look at it from the EV driver perspective. I'm a longtime EV driver. I've driven electric since 2002. So I thought, well, I want to put charging stations in places I want to go. State parks, national parks, museums, universities. So I reached out to, some of these different places and none of them had the budget to do it. There's no budget line item for EV charging stations or sustainability. Yeah. And they didn't have the person on the other side to really do the research and figure out the best approach. So that's when I decided, okay, let's do it kind of like Adopt a Highway, where we have a sponsored model. And that way we can provide the electricity fee-free to the EV drivers. And for me, it was I was coming at it more as an advocate. I knew we needed the EV charging stations at high profile locations so people have the confidence to go out and buy the car. And the other part of it was there's a real disconnect when it comes to selling cars at the dealer level. I mean, everybody acknowledges it. They just don't know how to do it. And you'd hear a lot of stories of people going in to want to hear about the Chevy Volt and they're talking them into a Chevy Cruze. And
so what's the disconnect specifically? They just don't know how to tell them how to charge or what needs to be done?
They're just not, they at that time, 2009, they just didn't have both feet in for EVs. So, and it takes training. These are people that are used to selling an internal combustion engine, and they don't have to sell people on how do you use a gas station. So it takes 5 times longer, actually, in some studies I've read, to sell an electric vehicle than it does a gas car. So it just wasn't their core business. So the best people, though, the good news is the best salespeople for the new technology are the actual EV drivers themselves. So if I can set up the scenario where the EV driver has an opportunity to share the experience with somebody that's curious about electric vehicles, that's how it happens. So by putting, charging stations at high profile destinations like the Getty Center, I'm setting up the opportunity for that to happen. So yeah, I didn't see the business case for a middleman between the utility and the EV driver. The smallest part of this whole endeavor is the cost of electricity. So, I didn't want to take something that's, a regulated commodity and way cheaper than gasoline. And what I was seeing is public. Yeah. And for the most part, public charging is more expensive than gasoline. So
we discussed that in a couple episodes ago. And it's kind of like, the first taste is free when electric vehicles first came out. And now they're just jacking up the prices. So it's not economical to charge.
Yes and no, because there's a lot of companies that are using EV charging as an amenity. Like a lot of shopping centers have free EV charging. A lot of, restaurants, a lot of destinations like hotels and things are offering EV charging so that they can encourage people to come to their property instead of somebody else. And I know I do it. I go to the mall and have dinner because I know I can get a free charge there. So,
How's the mapping going for it these days? Because it used to be really difficult between all of the charging companies to find out exactly where there's a charger, which one goes with your charge account.
That's another issue, is just all the different competing brands. The simple answer is PlugShare. PlugShare is the user aggregated mapping system. So if you go on PlugShare, they have Tesla, ChargePoint, EVgo, Electrify America. Everybody is on PlugShare. So you're going to want to go on PlugShare, to map out your trip before you go, so you can see where the chargers are and, be thoughtful about your range and that type of thing. So PlugShare is the way to go as far as the mapping. And the other thing I love about PlugShare is the user feedback. So for me, I can get emails instantly about that experience. So somebody can check in on PlugShare, and then the app sends an email to the site host, which Adopt a Charger is in a lot of the locations. And then I know if there's a situation. And I have to say that 99% of the check-ins I get on PlugShare are positive. People are super grateful for the service. And the only problem I ever get is we need more chargers. So it's actually like even the negative is kind of in a way a positive. So,
and I think the Biden administration, Joy, you'd know more about this than I would. I think they're planning on installing a few 100,000 chargers across the country. I think that was their initiative once they're in office.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. It's just a matter of, will it be allocated? They've been saying for years is, I know Kitty, she's running around the Capitol here in the state of California. There have probably been so many promises that you've heard about how many charging stations they're going to put in, when they really see the nuts and bolts of how much it's going to cost immediately to put in chargers, like the initial bottom line. All of a sudden budgets start to shift and change, and they decide to use it for something else, which is unfortunate.
Well, yeah. This is definitely a topic I have feelings about, because, if you ask my dad about that American Recovery and Reinvestment Act in 2009, the first thing he would think of is Solyndra. That was, the example of public funding going towards something that, went out of business very quickly. And you know what? They're right. Because I talked about Ecotality, the company that got $200 million in government funding, DOE funding. They went bankrupt in 3 years. That company was bought out of Chapter 11 by, I think it's Car Charging Group or National Charging Group or something, who went Chapter 11 in another couple years. They spun off the Blink network, had another initial public offering, and they're back out there right now, raising a lot of money through the stock market, taking advantage.
Go. So you have the funding that went to these companies that went bankrupt. So where'd the money go? I mean, I would love someone to audit that and see, did someone make a huge salary? Or
probably.
Well, I think that it was more so in this situation. They, went heavy in the beginning. Hiring people, getting big office space, lots of overhead, and people are tapping their fingers, getting paid on a job until this magical, edict comes down from on high. So, you see a lot of companies go through that. That company with Jeff Katzenberg and what was that new TikTok type company, Quibbly, that went under after like 6 months. It's, it would take proper planning and someone like Kitty or someone who's really seen,
who knows what they're doing,
right? And they can fit to scale the building of the model of how it should work. So it's very, very rare that you can find people that know how to build to scale when multis of millions of dollars are thrown at them. So I don't even think that it was just malicious. They just don't know what to do.
In my opinion, there was two things that were happening there. Well, maybe three things actually, because like I said, not see the business case for a middleman to the EV driver. It just makes that electricity more expensive, the service less stable, and it's harder to access the service. Everybody already has a relationship with their utilities. Over 80% of the charging still happens at home between midnight and 6 a.m. where people are paying, 10 cents or less per hour because of, demand pricing. So that's one thing. The utilities already provide electricity. The other thing was, I don't think those companies were focused on the EV drive experience. I talked about crowding stations in at Walgreens. I think the company wanted to spend the grant money, get it done as quick as possible without being thoughtful. And sometimes they were confused about who the actual consumer was or who their customer was. I think they were thinking it was the automakers, the utilities, or the investment banks. It wasn't necessarily how do we provide this service in a way that it's going to be utilized by the EV drivers. And the third reason why is, you're right. There is not the volume of electric vehicles on the road right now to, and also EV drivers, especially the early adopters, are pretty savvy about it. They can do the math. And when the Blink network is charging 49 cents per kilowatt hour, and they're used to paying 10 to 12 cents at home, hey, you're going to really, really, really need it. So I think the companies that are more focused on how do we be the value added, how do we enable the TCP fleet, Ubers and Lyfts to convert to electric, or how do we, enable a workplace to offer this to attract employees to their business. So, there is ways you can do it, but it all comes back to it's got to be cheaper than gas or people are not going to buy it. So,
and that's what we've seen is that the costs are getting more expensive than gas. So that just kind of, throws a monkey wrench into things. I am going to throw you a curveball though. And
Here I am.
So one of the questions that's kind of recurring, and it's actually gaining momentum recently, is hydrogen. And how do you feel about the hydrogen vehicle where people are saying, we should be focusing more on that, less on electricity? Because some people are on the fence. Some people think, well, wow, the off gas of a hydrogen vehicle is water vapor. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can actually produce hydrogen gas relatively easily and cheaply now. So what's your opinion of that versus, electric?
Okay. Wow. That could be a whole 20-minute podcast right there. But I will say that back in 2009, got to roll it back to when Obama took office. That was the time where people were considering either hydrogen, Arnold Schwarzenegger and his hydrogen highway, and George W. Bush was also a big fan of hydrogen. A lot of people don't know that he was actually the person that started the federal tax credit for alternative fuel vehicles. And I think that in 2009, a lot of people really saw a hydrogen future. What they didn't know about was Elon Musk and Tesla and Bob Lutz and the Chevy Volt and Carlos Ghosn and the Nissan Leaf. So I would say, without really getting into the weeds, it just hasn't scaled quick enough. Since 2009, we've sold about 30,000 hydrogen cars worldwide compared to 7.1 million. So when it gets to, how do we get there quick enough? It's got to be electric. And the other thing is, I could charge a car right here at this 120 volt outlet next to my desk. The infrastructure already exists for EV charging because we already have, the power lines to everybody's house. A lot of people already have a 240 volt outlet in their garage that was for a dryer. You can plug your car into that. So when it comes to building out hydrogen infrastructure, that's expensive. It's expensive. And, I'm putting in EV charging stations in Arkansas. I got a grant from the utility Entergy, and we're installing at least 10 locations in Arkansas. Yeah. Good luck driving a hydrogen car in Arkansas. Because,
Never gonna happen.
yeah, so if they can't even get there in California, how are they going to make this a 50-state strategy without wasting a lot of time and money that we just don't have that time right now? You know, for me, I feel like
we're behind the 8 ball. I mean, most of Europe is well ahead of us. Southeast Asia is picking up pace. We're lagging. We're kind of dragging our heels. One of the things I personally like to see is better recycling of the batteries, better use of old batteries, because we are just throwing them away or not using them, mining new materials. So that's where my geology comes in. We don't have enough of these raw materials. It's not going to happen. So
true that.
Well, the one good thing is that since COVID, there's been a slight bump in electric vehicle purchasing. So here in the state of California. So that could be from all kinds of things. People sitting, reevaluating their, where they want to be in life as far as financially, maybe making more better fiscal moves, as well as, just being more conscious as people start to transition into homework, which I think is going to be kind of semi-permanent depending on what field you're in.
Yeah, a lot of companies. I mean, what was it? Oracle's moving to Austin, but Larry Ellison's moving to Hawaii. We have Elon Musk who moved to Austin. What was it? Reddit is 100% permanent work from home now. Everyone.
Yeah.
We're going to see a lot of companies filing because why have office space? That's an extra cost. That CFOs are like, get rid of the real estate. That's millions of dollars a year. So people are staying at home, and if you don't have to commute, why would you? Honestly.
Exactly. I'm a homebody, so I'm right with you on that one. I just wanted to mention something about the batteries. It's not my area of expertise, but I do know that when a battery is done with its useful life in the automotive application, you can take that battery. It still has 90% of its life in it, and you can use it for storage for the grid, for storage for renewable energy. You can use it as a tool for storing. And then when it does need to be recycled, one of the executives, maybe his name is JT Straubel from Tesla, started a new company, Redwood Renewables. So what they're looking at is battery recycling. And the other thing I'll say about that is the technology is advancing so quickly that I wouldn't be surprised in 5 years if we had battery technology that's not as dependent on lithium and cobalt and all of that.
Cobalt's pretty bad. I think it was Tesla's coming up with a non-cobalt battery because the slave labor in the Congolese this is a bad thing. This is not part of the social justice aspect that would be failing it with the environmental side of things. But one of the things we vandalism of chargers. I know we only have a couple minutes left, but we do see chargers getting vandalized in cities. And, it's like, we're here to give you this thing to help you. And people are stealing the copper, which is valueless. I mean, it's a couple bucks worth of copper.
Yeah. Well, what I can tell you is I have never, and I've got hundreds of EV charging stations in over 10 states. Knock wood, I have never had any vandalism, not once.
Oh, good.
And I think the difference is people feel ownership of that asset, for one. And for two, they're always constantly in use because it's fee-free sponsored charging. Almost, all the time there's a car plugged into those charging stations. So where you end up having vandalism is where the charging stations are not used. They're sitting there. It's a stranded asset. It's just like, a target for people like that. So
extremely good point. Yeah. And also I think, if it's a free charger, that's hurting everybody, by vandalizing it or, putting it out of service, it's pointless. You're hurting everybody.
Yeah. And if somebody's constantly coming up and using that charging station, there's not an opportunity for somebody to get in there and with malicious behavior without being, witnessed. But there are ways you can do it with security cameras and that type of thing. But I always go back to it's a glorified electrical outlet. So, when it comes to you can really bring down the cost of the equipment, which then when you have incidents of vandalism and you can just go swap out that charger for a couple $100, it's not as big of an issue. It's when it's a complicated like ATM and there's lots of, network connected activity and that type of thing that it can be a little trickier.
Well, that's awesome. So we are at our 20-minute sign. So Kitty,
Okay.
if you could please let people know where they can find you.
Okay, thank you.
Websites.
My website is adoptacharger.org. On Twitter, we're at adoptacharger, and you can also find us on Facebook, or you can find me on LinkedIn.
Excellent. And also, as always, this broadcast will be downloaded onto LinkedIn later, and I will add all of your websites, all of your information so people can find you when they need you. But thank you so much. This is a
Totally
wonderful thing that you're doing to help the entire community. And I will always sign off with announcing that we're taking a bit of a holiday. So Joy is dressed as Santa, so you get to do it today.
Yes, we will be starting up the first week of January again. So feel free to log in then. But we hope that everybody has a happy holiday, a safe holiday, a time to reflect on what we've all gone through in 2020, and wish the best for a great 2021 new year. So also speaking about chargers, Young Professionals in Energy, which is what I'm on the board of, is going to have an e-mobility event online on January 6th. So Wendy and I will make sure we get the information out to you so you can register online for it. But we're ready to start the new year off right. So we're just wishing everybody the best holiday, and thanks for tuning in so much this year. And we're going to be ready for you next year, 2021.
Exactly. We've got more guest speakers coming. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Kitty.
Thank you, Wendy.
Speaker. This was wonderful, and we will definitely have you back because I'm probably going to want to talk to you more.
Okay. Yeah.
Take care, everybody. Merry
Bye.
Christmas, happy holidays, and hopefully vaccines come soon to everybody.
Yeah.